We laid an egg tonight.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. And today's show is also brought to you by another one of our patrons, and that is Stephen Edstein. So Stephen, thank you for supporting the show, and thank you for being the sponsor of today's show. Thank you for your support on Patreon. If you want to be like Stephen and support the show on Patreon, go to patreon.com/redrock_bball. My name is Josh Lloyd, and you can find me on Twitter @coincidentally @redrock_bball. What we're here to do today is we're going to look at Thursday's 6 games, we're going to preview Friday's 9 games, and in the middle of all that, I'm going to look back at the last 2 weeks. Talk about the top 20 players from the last 2 weeks based on head-to-head rankings, look at some players who may be overrated or overvalued as sell-high guys, underrated as buy-low players, and some guys who are owned in less than 50% of leagues who are currently in the top 100 for the last 2 weeks, and work out whether it's real or whether it's fake. So,
let's get to it.
All right, we're going to start off with the monstrous line of the night. Of course, it's where we always start the podcast, and Draymond Green gets it tonight. It was a very close battle between Draymond and a couple of other blokes, but he ended up with a very nice line. 13 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists, 4 triples, and the 4 steals for Draymond. 4 of 9 from the field. He doesn't take many shots these days. 1 of 4 from the line was not ideal. I'll grant you that. It's not a huge volume, and it is a 1-game sample size. But otherwise, his numbers were fantastic. And for this season, despite the addition of Kevin Durant, he's doing basically what we expected him to do, to be a player that's around that mid-second round range. He's currently ranked 17th for the season, and he's averaging 11 points a game. And yeah, it's down from last season, but we did expect that. But what he's doing is he's helping out in the other areas in larger quantities. He's averaging a 3 a game, but 8.5 rebounds. He's averaging 7.5 assists, 2.3 steals, 1.5 blocks. But what has been interesting to me is that his field goal percentage has dipped this season. I thought he would have been getting fewer shots, but easier shots. So I think he's got scope for that to increase. And it's also coming from his 3-point percentage being well down from 39 last year down to 33. So he's actually got scope to improve here. He can grab more rebounds, he can score a little bit more and do it with a little bit more efficiency, and of course giving you those defensive numbers that are great and those assist numbers which are clearly fantastic. And I said he's at 7.5 at the season. He's at 8 assists over the last 2 weeks. And his scoring might be down. He'll have the occasional decent scoring night, which he's had pretty good scoring nights the last couple. But that's if you drafted Draymond Green in that not first round, if you drafted him in that second round for scoring, well, then you don't know who Draymond Green is. And I'm sure that no one listening to this podcast did that hoping to get 20 points out of Draymond. That's just not what was going to happen with him. You have to surround him with the right guys. You have to or punt points, because we know how hard it is to get points outside of those first, say, 4 rounds. In majority of the 20-point scorers are all concentrated inside the top 50. So if you want to be competitive in the points category, you would have had to surround him with guys like Durant, like Curry, Westbrook, DeRozan, Mallow, these other high-scoring guys you can get in the 3rd or 4th round. But otherwise, the stuff that he's doing is obviously very, very valuable for fantasy. And just kept it going in a game where the Warriors were playing an extraordinarily overmatched Utah Jazz team. And in the end, they just got over the line. The Jazz were extraordinarily plucky, and in no small part due to the play of the waiver wire line of the night. And it is, of course, this podcast's very own Joe Ingles, and I use that term loosely. Of course, Joe was on this podcast back in February, so I count him as one of the Locked On members, one of the Locked On group, one of our own. He is, of course, from Australia. I think it's the first time I've had an Australian who's gotten an award. I'm trying to think if we don't include Kyrie. I can't remember. Patty Mills may have gotten one. Yeah, I can't. Bogut. Anyway, let's stick with Joe Ingles. He was fantastic for this Jazz team. 21 points, and it was the other areas that he helped in as well. 5 threes, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 steals, 1 block, 7 of 13 from the field, and he has been a revelation this season. I think it's fair to say. He is shooting over the last 2 weeks 56% from three, 56% from the field, and on the year he's at 50 from the field and 47 from three. Converting any opportunity that he gets. I thought there was a fear, and it still could be realised, that he was out of the rotation this year with the return of Alec Burks, with the addition of George Hill, with the return of Dante Exum, with the addition of Joe Johnson. But obviously injuries have transpired and haven't allowed the Jazz to get their full complement of players out there. So we don't really know how Ingles sits moving forward, but he's been a key part of what they've done, and including tonight's game, but not exclusively due to tonight's game. Joe Ingles is ranked 104th over the last 2 weeks, and I'm sure not one person listening to this would have said, you know what, Joe Ingles, 104, yep, I'm down with that. And he's doing it in 19 minutes. And it's coming because he's at 56% from the field. It's coming because he's giving you 2 threes a game in 19 minutes. He's giving you 2.5 assists. He's giving you a steal a game. And 9 points and 2.5 rebounds. So not fantastic numbers, but it is coming based on this huge field goal percentage which he's shooting, which is a massive surprise considering he was at 42 and 43% in his first 2 years in the NBA. But he has been an absolute key cog, and for as long as Hayward, Hood, and Hill remain out, he's going to get 30 minutes, and he's going to be a useful player that hits you some threes, get you some assists, and get you some steals. So take a look at Ingles in certain situations. We don't know the severity of Hayward. We don't know the severity of Hood. We don't know the severity of anybody that plays for the Jazz, because they are the absolute worst team in the NBA in terms of giving out information. Everybody is frustrated. Jazz beat writers, Jazz announcers. Nobody knows the story with the timeframes of these players. So you could look to grab Ingles, but his value is going to be extraordinarily short-lived. So if you're dropping someone, even if it's in a 14-team league, look at who you're dropping, because you might get one more game out of Ingles where he gets 30 minutes, and then he might go down to 20 minutes. And I think expecting him to keep a 56% field goal percentage running for long stretches of time to maintain this, even top 150 value, is probably going to be a struggle. But for now, he's doing everything that he needs to do, and it's been pretty bloody impressive, if I do say so myself. If you want to hear more about the Jazz's injury situations, and you want to hear more about Joe's fantastic performance in that loss to the Warriors, how about you listen to the OG Locked On podcast? Locked On Jazz, the first one that David Locke started. He's been doing this for a few years. Has podcasts on the Jazz every day, does a short 5 or 10 minute one after each game the Jazz plays as well, just to wrap things up. So David's going to have all the news on this performance from the Warriors, everything happening with Joe Ingles, with the injuries to Gordo, to Georgie Hill, to Roddy Hood, all those blokes. Listen to David Locke. I'm sure you already listened to him anyway. It was a podcast that I listened to for many years before the network was started, and he is, again, the OG and the founder of the Locked On Podcast Network. So go listen to Locked On Jazz for all your Jazz information. The young gun of the night, is there any doubt, really? Whenever this guy plays, is it anyone else apart from the process? Joel Embiid, he only scored 14 points, and he was inefficient on 5 of 15 shooting. But in the end, when you have 7 boards, 2 assists, 3 steals, and 4 blocks, it doesn't matter, because this is how good this guy is. He has been amazing on a per-game basis this year. He's ranked 33rd this season, and he has had a bit of a drop in his efficiency. The last 2 weeks, he's shooting just 41%. I think when Simmons eventually comes back, he'll get some of his efficiency back. He might lose some touches, but Simmons is not a high-usage guy. He's not a high guy that's going to be demanding a lot of shots. He's just going to put Embiid in better positions and take a lot of defensive focus on him, because Simmons' ball handling and his passing requires that extra attention. So we could see a real step forward from Joel, but he has been tremendous this year. He's still shooting 44% from 3. He's averaging 2.5 blocks a game on the season, 7.5 rebounds and 18 points. You don't need me to tell you much more about Embiid. And once the restrictions are cleared, we're talking about a guy who I think is going to have a shot to be a top 10 player. And this is pretty ballsy, but as early as next year, he could be a top 10 guy. I don't think that when we look at projections for next season and all that sort of stuff, he's going to be there. But by the end of next season, he could very, very comfortably be a top 10 guy. And I think we're going to see health prevailing, multiple years of him being a top 15 guy at least. And again, that could start as early as next season. On per 36 numbers, he's ranked 8th this season. I don't think he's ever going to play 35 or 36 a game. You're probably looking at big men 32, 33, but who knows? Cousins plays 36 a game. So we could be looking at absolute monster numbers from Embiid moving forward. There's almost zero chance that you're going to be able to get him in a dynasty league. Zero. But if for some reason you have to view him as a top 10 player moving forward, perhaps even higher. That's how good this guy has been. He's not quite at the Karl Anthony Towns level. He's not quite at Anthony Davis level for big men, but he's not far behind, and he's a guy that you'd put in that conversation with say, Kristaps. And I'd probably even have him just a little bit above Porzingis, but that's the zone we're talking about, a top 10 guy moving forward throughout his career. And again, it could happen by even as early as next season, although it's probably just a tad ambitious for Joel Embiid. Let's look at the dud of the night, and it goes to Zach Randolph. I only give duds of the night to people who are owned in over 70% of leagues, and that is Z-Bo. I don't really understand why he's still owned in so many leagues. He's the 182nd ranked player this season. In his 2 games back, he's ranked 369th. That's not ideal, obviously, apart from it being 369.
Giggity!
And it's because he's shooting 27%. In those 2 games. He is getting 11.5 rebounds, but in true Zach Randolph style, no steals, no blocks, only 9.5 points. And in this game, he was 7 of 9. He had no steals, no blocks. He was 2 of 10 from the field, and he had 2 assists. You can do better in every 10-team league that you're in. There is no need to own Zach Randolph unless you're just absolutely desperate for rebounds at the expense of everything else. He will be better than what he currently is at the moment, but in a 12, in a 10... I don't really see the purpose in owning Randolph. And you could even make an argument in 14-team leagues that his lack of production in so many areas ends up hurting your team, despite the fact that he gets 8 rebounds a game. And JaMychal Green is playing so well that there's no need for them to increase what Randolph does minutes-wise. And Randolph is getting these minutes. He's only getting 22 a game. And they said he was going to play a lot of backup center. And this is without Brandon Wright. Now, Wright, we might not ever see Brandon Wright again based on this ridiculous injury history that he's got with ankles and knees. But the fact that Randolph's not getting bigger minutes at this playing time means that there's a chance that it actually reduces by maybe 1 or 2 minutes later on. I guess this is just a long-winded way of me saying there's no reason to own Zach Randolph in a 10-team league and in a 12-team league in basically every situation that you can think of. All right, let's get into these games now. We'll look at them all in detail, breaking them down, and then we'll move on to look at the last 2 weeks of action and try and get some information out of that. The first game, we take a look at the Denver Nuggets and the Washington Wizards. The Nuggets, they made a change to their starting lineup. They moved Kenneth Faried out of the lineup and they started Darrell Arthur. They also made an injury-induced change as well, which could have been coming regardless, with Emmanuel Mudiay out with an ankle sprain and Jameer Nelson starting. Now, I did mention this yesterday or the day before, saying that a Nurkic-Arthur combination is... it's the best combination for Nurkic and for the team. Now, whether those 2 guys should be the guys starting or not is a secondary argument. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. It's more to do with who gets the most minutes. The best combination is Gallinari, Chandler, and Jokic in that 3-4-5 combo. And that's what the bench unit is, that Chandler-Jokic combination, and that's what gets the most minutes. Arthur started. He played 20 minutes, 6, 3, and 4, including 2 triples. He is a good shooter. He's a very good defender. Is he going to make a dent in leagues? Yeah, probably not. You're probably looking in deeper 16-team leagues, but I guess the question that majority of people want to know is, what do I do with Ken Faried? Now, I've been telling you for ages that Faried is shit. Now, he went to the bench. He did not play at all, but Mike Malone, if we're going to take Michael Malone at his word, everything that he says in his not at his word, based on prior incidences, whatever he says in his press conference will be the opposite. Because in the press conference, he said, it was a decision not to use Kenneth Faried. It was matchup based. We didn't think we could go 4 bigs because the Wizards were going small. And according to Malone, going small means playing Markieff Morris at the 4. Like, how is that small? Markieff Morris is a 4. This is not going small, Michael. That's not going small. But anyway, the Wizards were going small, and you can't see my face on the screen because I'm air quoting here. They were going small, so we couldn't play Ken Faried. That is a pile of horseshit. He said that if we need him for the next game against Orlando, which is on Saturday, I believe, he'll be ready. That's ambiguous. Faried was not. Look, he was worth owning for that miraculous stretch he was having at the start of the season where he was pulling defensive numbers fair and square out of his ass. But that's not the player that he is. And the minutes have been dwindling. There is no reason for me to hold on to Kenneth Faried. I don't own him anywhere because, again, it was a nice stretch to start the season, but I do believe in common sense. It doesn't always come true, but I do believe in common sense. And that meant to me that Farid was going to be limited in what he could do this season, and that's sort of coming to fruition now. So he's a clear drop guy, assuming there's someone you want to add. Again, no point dropping someone for no reason, and he's not 100% eliminated from the rotation, although with the way that Juancho Hernan Gomez played and Darrell Arthur played, there's no real reason to get Farid in. And I'm really tempted to go on a showcasing rant, but I won't. You people who've listened to the podcast for a while know about my take on showcasing. It still gets brought up to me all the time. They're only playing him to showcase him for a trade. I'll let you guys fill in the gaps. And if you want more information on my showcasing trade, hit me up, or showcasing idea, hit me up on Twitter, and I'll be sure to send you an all caps rant. The headline, though, is Nick Jokic. He is flying. 28 minutes for Jokic, 17 and 11, a block. I had someone just tweet me today saying, is it time? Are you buying Jokic? I went, mate, I didn't sell him. And he goes, I just picked him up off free agency today. Like, what's happening in that league? Why is he on free agency? Why is he on free agency now? I could understand 3 weeks ago when he was being crucified by Malone's silly rotations. But for the last 2 weeks, he's been a guy that's been a top 70 player or top 50 player even in 21 minutes. And the minutes are coming up. He's great. Yusuf Nurkic, he played much better next to Darrell Arthur. Now, it helps that you're playing the Wizards, but 13 and 7 in 21 minutes is good for Nurkic. Jokic should be getting 30. Nurkic should be getting 18. That's how the centre minutes should run. That's how they should continue to do it. But Nurkic can potentially have value. It was obviously fueled by 6 of 6 shooting, and he's not normally that efficient. So don't buy too much into this performance from against the Wizards. But Nurkic showed a little bit here. Will Barton played 43 minutes. Not really sure why we need to see 43 minutes of Will Barton, to be honest. 11, 2, and 3 with 3 steals. Wasn't the greatest performance, but he's still a guy to own despite my misgivings about his form. And Jameer Nelson, who made the start, and he'd been playing decent minutes anyway. Moutier had been limited to 20 in most nights. 10, 4, and 8 for Nelson with 2 steals. I think that you want to grab Nelson. Now, when Moutier comes back, there is no guarantee that he gets back into the starting lineup. Or if he does get back into the starting lineup, that he gets 30 minutes a night. There's no guarantee that Malone does that. He's had a fairly quick leash on Moutier. The starting lineup had been trash prior. Now, whether they put him back in with this group, with this new group, I don't know. But it's definitely worth grabbing Nelson. Now, I thought we'd get some more Jamal Murray in this game. We only got 17 minutes because we had to have 43 of Will Barton out there. Murray had 6 points with 2 triples. He's just a hold in 12-team leagues at this point, where it wasn't Wilson Chandler's best night, and that's a fair understatement. He went 2 of 16 from the field for 5 points, 8 boards, and a steal. But don't get too down on him. I still do think that he is somewhat of a sell high, but he's not going to be this bad moving forward. Also, the Rooster just can't get anything going this year. 14 and 4 for Gallinari in 32 minutes. Onto the Wizards, Brad Beal, just the standard 37 minutes for Brad, 26, 3, and 5 with 4 triples. My doomsday warning still exists. He should be, if you can get any sort of top 40 value back for him, you do it as soon as possible. 2 quiet games in a row for Otto Porter. The shots just aren't there. Only 9 shots in this game, 9 and 5. With a 3, with 3 steals, with a block. The minutes are fine, but he's just not touching the ball as much as Johnny Wall and Braddles get the majority of those touches. Now, Wall wasn't quite as effective as he was the last game. 15, 7, and 5, 3 steals and a block is still pretty impressive. And the opposite of impressive was Marcin Gortat. He played 36 minutes because Mihinmi was out again. He's going to continue to get this big run. But he's just not that impressive to me. 4 and 7 with 2 steals and a block. And this is coming from a guy, I've been a real big Marcin Gortat fan over the last few years. He's been consistently underrated in fantasy, but this is the year that it tipped, and now he's significantly overrated. You know my thoughts on him, that he is going to be probably excised from the top 100 as soon as Mihinmi comes back, maybe sooner. Markieff started off the game horrendously, much like Barton the other day. Like for the first quarter, you're sitting on negative DFS points, and you go, why am I still doing this with Markieff? But he recovered to go 15, 3, and 4 in 33 minutes and turned it around. And I still do believe that he is a 12-team league guy. Still disappointed that we're not seeing much Tomas Satoransky, which, he's one of my favorite rookies that's going around in the league. Let's look at the next one, Minnesota and Toronto. Zachary LaVine, 20 shots, 29 points, 12 of 20 shooting is great. 3 triples, 6 assists, a real big night from LaVine. While Karl Anthony Towns wasn't spectacular, but when you're not spectacular and you go 17 and 11 with a block and a 3, I think you're still pretty good. Not much to really talk about there. Andy Wiggins started off the game red hot, 25 points on 19 shots, so the efficiency was back, but as usual, no steals, no blocks, just the 1 assist, but the 6 rebounds is a bit of a help, so a nice bounce back performance for Wiggins back in Toronto after a couple of lean performances. This is the Kyle Aldridge that I was interested in. 15 minutes only. I'd love him to get more, but I understand the difficulties. But 6 and 8 with a steal and a block, and 3 of 3 from the field. You might not be aware of it, but those numbers can actually, if that was what he could do every game, and I believe that he can do it, not that he will, but that he can, that's a 12-team league guy. That's a guy that slots inside the top 120. He's had I think he's had 3 or 4 good games out of his last 5. A couple with higher minutes, a couple with low minutes, but he can accumulate these stats in limited minutes. So he's always a guy on a low night, just, hey, let's add him in. Maybe I get some high efficiency. Maybe I get 8 boards. Maybe I get 2 blocks. Maybe I get 2 steals. Like, who knows what you're going to get? He can do this stuff. So he's always a name to watch. And if one of these blokes goes down and they force him into a starting role, you're talking about short-term top 40 type value for Kyle Aldridge. Gorgie Jeng, 10, 7, and 3. Yeah, just middling numbers for him. But I've got to talk about Rick Rubio. Only the 29 minutes for Rick, 7, 3, and 3 with 2 triples. He's really struggling. If he gets dropped in one of my leagues, I will add him. I'll put that out now. You know that I'm a fan of Rubio. But the way he is being used in this offense is poor. He's being used poorly. Now, I'm not here trying to criticize Tom Thibodeau that much, but you have to use him more than this. You have to use him in a different way. There's no point in having Rubio on your team or out there so he can dribble the ball over halfway, and give it to Levine, and give it to Wiggins, and then bugger off and stand in the corner and just wait for a 3-point shot when you can't shoot them. That's not what Rubio does. That's not what he should do, and it's not actually translating into wins. The Timberwolves are on pace for 22 wins this season, so it is not working. He needs to facilitate look, Levine can't dribble. Wiggins can't dribble. They can't do those things. Wiggins is not a good long-range shooter. He needs cuts. He needs drives. He needs Rubio to facilitate this stuff. They need to have the ball in Rubio's hands more, but I don't know if that's the way that Thibodeau is going to run things, unfortunately. I still think that you own him, and again, his numbers, they're not great. His steals are down, his assists are down, his field goal percentage is down, so most of his key numbers are down. I think he can bounce back from them to a degree, but it is going to take somewhat of a change from Thibodeau's thought process to do that, and the consistent losing might be the trigger to do that, so we'll see how that pans out, but it wasn't a good night. The thing you look at is that Chris Dunn's still not good. 4 points with 5 assists, and he's got a long way to go before he even threatens to take Rubio's job, I believe. The Toronto side of things, lots of hand-wringing, lots of conjecture about reports about Jonas Valanciunas that came out on Roto-World saying that that he's going to be used based on matchups and game flow, and it's a load of shit. It's just not the case. I'm not saying that Roto-World guys are full of shit. I'm saying that the way that Casey said it is just not what he actually does with this situation. Valanciunas' minutes and production were well down. I've highlighted this, I've documented this, but they were due to like 4 games of 30-plus point winning margins, and then a game against Cleveland where he was limited due to the fact that the Cavs were a bad matchup for him, and he played still 25 in that game. And it's not like he played 22 minutes and they gave Bebe 27 minutes. They went with Valanciunas for 25 and they gave Bebe 14. So they just played without a center in that matchup. But we had a tight game, which the Raptors ended up winning by 14, but it was relatively close. Valanciunas got into very early foul trouble. Bebe came in and played fantastically. And JV still played 29 minutes. This is where I believe that he sits for most of the year, in this 28 to 29 minute role, with the exception of an injury or a blowout or an odd matchup. 20 points, 10 boards, 1 block. And he has got actual scope to get better because his block rate is well down this season based on what he's done the last 2 years. So he can actually get better in that area. His percentages were his usual stellar self. I've been harping on him being a buy low guy. You probably can't do it after a 20-10 game, but if the uncertainty is there, and it's rightful uncertainty because of the way that Casey has completely misused him, but the way that he played today, he came out early with the fouls, and then he played with the second units, and he ripped them apart because that's what he can do, because he doesn't have to share the ball with Lowry and DeRozan at times. And because of the way that Bebe's playing, maybe they do that. Get him out early and get him to just destroy the end of the first quarter, start of the second quarter with these bench guys as well. I'm full of hope for Valanciunas. As for Bebe, you know that I am one of the biggest Bebe fans that's going around. I've been on this guy since he was drafted by the Hawks. And clamoring for him to get minutes and really interested in getting these minutes this season. And I was pretty steadfast saying, you know what, he is the backup this year. He is the backup. It is not Pirtle. It is going to be Bebe. And he has repaid me in a big way. 8 and 9 here in 19 minutes, 3 blocks with 80% shooting. He catches pretty much everything that gets thrown to him. He's a defensive menace. And in certain situations, you can look at him in a 12-team league and go, you know what he's going to give me, these blocks, it's going to help me. But I don't think that he is an absolute must-own player, just based on the fact that it's going to be hard for him to get enough minutes and to be impactful enough consistently. I almost put him in that Cole Aldrich type of zone. Like his rank might come in at 110 or 120, and we saw him have top 50 value when he had that little run when Valanciunas was out. That we know he can do it, but the minutes just might not be there to solely rely upon Bebe moving forward long term. But I do really, really, really like him. It's not it's not like he's a guy that I think is terrible. I just think that Valanciunas is a lot better. Lowry had 25 points. He had 2 rebounds. He had 11 assists. And DeRozan went 27, 8, and 5. It's pretty stock standard nights. DeRozan's efficiency wasn't quite there. And that's really about it, I guess, for them. Norm Powell only played the 7 minutes here, but we'd expect with DeMario Carroll likely to be out on Friday, Carroll will get a start, and he's going to be Powell will get a start, and he'll be a very nice guy to look at. Whereas DeMario Carroll, the minutes are back up for him. He's playing a lot better. If he's around in a 12-team league, I'm adding him 10, 5, and 2, 3 triples, and 2 steals for DeMario Carroll. Let's move on now to the next game, which is Philadelphia and the New Orleans Pelicans. Well, the Sixers had lost 23 road games in a row, which is clearly not an ideal quantity of games. But they got the victory because they were taking on a Pelicans team that's equally as bad. Is that a fair way of phrasing it? The Pelicans are terrible, and there's lots of whispers about Dell Demps and Alvin Gentry's job at the moment. Nothing's happening, but it could happen. I've already spoken about Joel Embiid. There was no Jahlil Okafor in this one. There's no Jared Bayless in this one. So we saw Ersan Ilyasova with another huge night. 23 and 8 for Ersan, 2 triples, 4 assists, and 1 steal in 32 minutes. Now, he is going to lose some time when Jahlil comes back. He's going to lose some time when Nerlens Noel comes back, which could be on the weekend. He's going to lose time, potentially when Ben Simmons comes back, depending on exactly how they run that rotation. But for now, Ersan does have back-end 12-team league value. It will depreciate pretty quickly, but he has been huge while these big men have been out for this team. Šarić played 25 minutes, 13 and 5 with 2 triples, and everything I said for Ilyasova, doubles for Dario is that the minutes will drop when Jahlil comes back and when Nerlens comes back as well. Lots of talk on Nerlens. As a stash guy, it's just going to be hard for him to get enough minutes to be productive. He can still be useful in 22 minutes. Does he get 22 minutes? Initially, there's no way he does it. There's no way he's getting 29 a night. They're not going to play big minutes of him and Okafor together or him and Embiid together. He's going to play limited time. It'd be interesting to see how they do it. So, while yes, he is fine as a stash, and maybe they play him and they take Okafor out of the rotation, I'd be highly doubtful of that, given the tenseness and the coldness in the relationship between Noel and the Sixers. But I guess it's a possibility. Depending on who you're dropping, he's absolutely fine to own. But my expectations for Nerlens are very, very limited at the moment. Nick Stauskas moved to the bench and was great. This is just exactly what he is now. He plays off the bench, he's good, he starts, and he falls apart. 22 minutes for Source, 14, 2, and 5 with 3 triples, back to what he'd been doing earlier in the year. And with Jared Bayless' timeline unknown, you've got to own Spanish Chocolate Sergio Rodriguez. 16, 2, and 8 with 4 triples, a huge night from Rodriguez. It helps that it was a really good matchup, but it was a good performance. Also, Bob Cove was back. A triple one, 7 points, 7 rebounds, back to his usual 3 of 9 shooting, but otherwise, a really good Bob Cove night. And if he is available in your league, I think you do need to. I think you do need to grab him. That I know he's had issues with field goal percentage. You've got to be able to either punt that or absorb that. But the other numbers are fine. The steals, get some blocks, some boards, and the threes. So Bob Covey is a guy that should be around. My boy Rashawn Holmes is also great, 8 and 7 with 2 blocks, but he is going to be invisible when everybody comes back, unfortunately. On to the pals. Tony Davis, 26 and 11 with 2 blocks. He's dipped a little bit. You can tell the frustration with him is pretty palpable. And the rest of this team was putrid. Drew, that's not true, because Langston Galloway was good. 28 for Lang, 19 and 4 with 3 triples. He got some extra run because Drew Holiday and Etwan Moore were both out of this game. That's awesome for short-term 16-team league value and DFS type stuff for Galloway, but not much more than that. Bud Hield got another start, and man, I know he's a rookie, but he's just bad, and I don't have hope for him improving. 6 points with 2 triples, 4 rebounds, 2 assists in 34 minutes for Bud on 2 of 12 shooting. Now, coming into the season, I thought that Buddy Hield was a decent guy to pick in the last couple of picks. I thought, I almost 100% sure I said this on record saying that this is a real chance to be Buddy Hield's best season. For him, this rookie year could be his best because he is going to be without Drew Holiday for an unspecified amount of time, and Tyreek Evans for an unspecified amount of time, for Quincy Pondexter without Quincy Pondexter for an unspecified amount of time. So I thought, you know what, Bud can come in, step right in and be good. And then when they realise that he's not good and these other players come back, his role will be limited. Well, he hasn't even taken this opportunity on board when all these guards are out to show that he can do anything. Now, he is just a rookie, so I'll cut him a little bit of slack, but I just don't believe in Bud Hield long term. If you get a tasty offer for him in a dynasty, I would take it. And it really depends if the person is a huge college basketball fan, because then they'll be all over Hield. Nah, man, he killed it. Steph Curry numbers. That's cool, but he's not Steph Curry. He's got a long way to go. He's got a long way to work in plenty of other areas. And for a guy whose only real skill is shooting, he can't seem to shoot in the NBA. So it's going to be interesting. It goes without saying, there's no reason to own him in any 12-team leagues this year. And even 14-team leagues is a massive, massive stretch. But in Dynasty, a little bit of a different story, but my hopes for Hield are not very high. Terrence Jones, move on, 6 and 3 in 19 minutes for Jonesy, and Timmy Frazier started in place of Drew. He had 7, 6 and 6 in 29 minutes. He is fine to hold for the time being. I would personally prefer Sergio Rodriguez, because I just think we're going to get a little bit more use out of Rodriguez, out of these temporary starting point guards. The Pelicans also made a change and started Alexei Ajinça. Now, I like Ajinça a lot. I like him when he replaces Anthony Davis, not necessarily plays next to him. He had a really early foul trouble, 8 and 4 in 14 minutes for Alexei, and Omer Ashik came in and played well, 8 and 9 in 20 minutes for Ashik, but neither of those guys are really tickling anyone's fancy for fantasy leagues. Let's move on now to the next game. It is the Portland Trailblazers. They took on the Memphis Grizzlies in a really disappointing loss for Portland. CJ McCollum, 24 points, not much else. And by not much else, I mean 0 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, and 4 triples. But a very efficient night from McCollum, whereas Dame Lillard was the opposite. He was just 6 of 19 and 5 of 7 from the line for 19, 3 and 2. And this is exactly what Lillard does. He's up and down, and that's great in rotisserie leagues. Well, it's not so great because his field goal percentage isn't awesome, but in a roto, long-term thing, in a weekly head-to-head, it's fine, but in DFS, it kills you. They made a change to the starting lineup. One was forced because Mo Harkless was out with an ankle injury. You know my boy Mo. They started Evan Turner in his place, and he was actually good. And despite the criticisms of Evan Turner, and they've been justified, he's actually improved his play over the last couple of weeks. Not enough to be owned, but if you're looking in 16 teams or 14 teams, then he comes into consideration. He had 15 and 10 in his start. Alan Crabb got some extra minutes. He played 31, but in true Alan Crabb style, went 7 and 5 with no other numbers. And you should limit him to very, very deep leagues. The other change they made was at power forward. They didn't bring Al-Farouq Aminu back in, but they started Myers Leonard. Didn't matter because Myers Leonard was terrible. He was 0 points, 6 rebounds in 17 minutes. Eddie Davis had a 10-10 double-double in 18, and Aminu actually played the most minutes out of the fours, playing 24, going 5 and 11 with 2 steals. His shot is still way, way off, but it is going to come back around. He is going to be a 12-team league guy this year, Al-Farouq Aminu, and he is available in plenty of leagues, so have a look to see if he's around. If you own Mason Plumlee, you'd be pretty pissed with this performance. 1 of 9 and 2 of 6 from the line. 4, 6, and 4, 2 steals and a block. So still got the other numbers going. And again, you'd look at this line in a completely different spectrum if he was 5 of 9 and had 12, 6, 4, 2, 1. You go, you know what? I'm pretty happy with that from Mason. But when you get 4 points, you go, this is shithouse. And that's just what happens. Marc Gasol continues to be an animal, 36 and 9 with 4 triples. Huge night for him. JaMychal Green, also huge. Grabbed a career-high 18 rebounds, had 6 points, 2 assists and 1 steal. Shooting wasn't quite there, only 2 of 8, but still you've got to own JaMychal Green at this point. And Tone Allen, I think, I know he's only owned in 11% of leagues. It's way too low. He's at 15 and 10 in this game with 2 steals. The steals are coming. When everyone comes back, yes, some of his usage and that drops. But for now, Tone Allen's providing really, really important numbers and useful numbers. Chandler Parsons wearing the deepest V-neck T-shirt of all time. If you haven't seen the pictures, I'm sure you can find them. It was ludicrous. Go and check them out. He was out for this game, but when he comes back, obviously that impacts Tone Allen as well. Now, an interesting change in the rotation from Fizdale here. Tony Douglas played the entire fourth quarter. He ended up with 27 minutes, going 11, 1, and 3, while Andy Harrison played 26 minutes and had 6, 1, and 3. This new development in the rotation makes me say, you know what, if I've got Harrison, he's no longer a guy that I probably want in 12-team leagues, but it doesn't make me say, let's go grab Tone Douglas. It basically eliminated Wade Baldwin from the rotation and split the point guard minutes between Douglas and Harrison. 11 points is okay, 3 assists is okay, but I'm not going out there and going, quick, let's grab Tony Douglas. Deeper leagues, sure. After he'd played 6 and 8 in his first 2 games, this is a huge improvement, but it's not enough for me to get too excited. 32 minutes for Troy Daniels, 2 of 12. This is the Troy Daniels conundrum. The shot attempts have dropped since Zebo's been back. The production has dropped significantly as well, and he had 5 and 2 with 1 steal and 1 3. He is far from a 12-team league guy, in my opinion. Troy Williams started, only played the 20 minutes, just 0 points and 5 rebounds. There's no reason to own him in 12ers. And my boy Deontay Davis, he just looks impressive whenever he's out there. 2 boards and a block in 6 minutes, and I just wanted to mention him. He is a really, really good dynasty guy to pay attention to. I think he can develop into a very good player. The Golden State Warriors and the Utah Jazz. Sean Livingston, the only player to rest for the Warriors, and they needed all their players because the Jazz got pretty close. Steph had 26, 5, and 2. Durant had 21, 11, and 4 with 2 blocks. And I already touched on Draymond's big game. Klay Thompson, only 28 minutes. The shot wasn't going, 5 of 13, 10, 6, and 2, and didn't play down the stretch in the fourth quarter because Steve Kerr said, Ian Clark had it going. Like, sorry, Steve, I know you're a coach of the year, but I don't care if Ian Clark's got it going. When the game's close, just put Klay Thompson in there. It's all fine to ride a hot hand, so to speak, but put Klay Thompson in. There's no need for Klay Thompson to sit because Ian Clark has it going. Because someone's got it going until they don't. Get Klay back in there. Pat McCaw stepped up in Sean Livingston's absence. 10 points with 2 triples in his 16 minutes and got a steal. I really believe in McCaw moving forward. I think he's going to be a very, very interesting player, whether it's on this team or another one, and whether it takes him 4 or 5 years to become that guy, I think that he still will become that guy. So he's always a name to keep an eye on. Zaza Pachulia was pretty yuck. 2, 4, and 3 in his 22 minutes. Onto the Jazz. They started a lineup of Shelvin Mack, Dante Exum, Joe Johnson, Boris Diaw, and Rudy Gobert. Really not a great lineup at all, but they got close. Gobert was fantastic, 20 and 17 with a block, and he hit all 8 of his field goal attempts, just the 4 of 7 from the line, which is a little bit disappointing given how well he's been shooting there. We talked about Joe Ingles' big game, and Shelvin Mack played 37, going 19, 2, and 5 with 2 steals. He's the point guard you want while George Hill is out, because Dante Exum just doesn't do anything. Now, he looks solid out there, but he shot 1 of 11. He provides good defense. His passing looked a little bit better, but 2 points, 3 rebounds, and 5 assists in 37 minutes isn't going to get it done. And from our purposes, we want some stat production, and Shelvin Mack's going to be that guy. 8, 4, and 3 for Diaw in 26 is fine, and Trey Lyles had 23. He had 9, 6, and 2. I like Lyles, but there is no reason to own him in any sort of 12-team redraft format, while Joey Johnson had 13 in 28, replacing Gordie Hayward, and he is, him and Joe Ingles, a decent short-term guys as long as Hood and Hayward both remain out, which is a possibility. We don't know the exact time frame on those guys returning. The last game of the night, the San Antonio Spurs and the Chicago Bulls. Weird game. The Bulls get the victory. They're basically unstoppable when they're on TNT Thursday night. It's a very weird phenomenon. Kawhi 24, 8 and 5 was hitting some stupid shots down the stretch, but some good numbers there. Now Tone Parker, after Greg Popovich said he's going to be out a while, he missed one game, so not really sure of Greg's understanding of time frames. Parker started, played 24 and went 8, 1 and 5. He's just a real shell of himself. There was a stretch where he was putting up some okay numbers, but it's just so hard to rely upon him in 12-team leagues. While Patty Mills, another hot shooting night, 16, 2 and 1 with 4 triples and 2 steals in just the 24 minutes. And you can own him in 12-team leagues. Just realise he's probably going to be your worst player in a lot of spots. Pau Gasol got the video tribute. I don't understand video tributes. Like, Pau Gasol was there for 2 years, did nothing really spectacular. Yeah, all-star seasons, but he was there for 2 years. I don't think we need a video tribute, but what am I? I'm not working game ops for teams. Gasol 13, 10 and 3 with a block, with a 3. A decent night, and some of the early panic is subsided with him. And Danny Green, this is a very Danny Green line. Just the 25 minutes, but 9 points, all coming from threes and 3 steals. It is very useful in fantasy. He's just been very inconsistent, that he's not a must-own guy. And LaMarcus Aldridge continues to just be frustrating. 5 of 15 for 10 points. He did have 4 blocks. That is really unlike him, so don't bank on that. 6 boards. Just, I get the feeling, and this is pure speculation, that he's just cracking the shits, that he's just sulking. Because this is the type of person that he comes across to me to be. That he doesn't get his own way and he cracks the shits. But that's pure speculation on my behalf, and look, he could really turn it on in the second half of the year, as he did last year, but this start to the year is worse than the start he had last season. John Simmons, have a look at John Simmons blow a breakaway dunk. If you're going to blow a breakaway dunk, that's the way to do it. You're double pumping, two-handed, behind the head jam, and then you miss it. I'm sure he's not going to hear about that from Pop at all. Manu had 0 points, not his best night. On to the Bulls. It was a Thursday night game. It was on TNT, so Rajon Rondo almost had a triple-double. 12, 10, and 9 with 2 steals, but the usual stuff applies. He just hurts the team so much when he's out there, and he puts up stats, but who gives a shit? I suppose we do, because we're playing fantasy, and Fred Hoiberg continues to play him, so that matters to us. Nick Mirotic, I like Nick Mirotic, you know that, but only 22 minutes for him, and with Doug McDermott back, his ceiling is limited until someone gets injured. 9 and 6 for Miro with 2 steals and a 3. And actually, it was really important with this team in the bench unit. It's just not enough to hold in 12-team leagues. Jim Butler struggled, 13 and 9 for Jim with 4 assists, 2 steals and a block. The shot wasn't falling, and I'll say that's possibly because of the bloke who was standing opposite him wearing number 2 for the Spurs. Taj, 12 and 5, 2 blocks, solid. Lopez, 12 and 4, 1 block, solid. Dwayne Wade, 25 and 5 with a 111. Also solid, although he hurt your percentages. So some pretty decent numbers across the board from the Bulls. And Chris Felicio clearly in the rotation now ahead of, I forgot the bloke's name, Bob Portis. That's the guy. And Felicio's in that rotation now. So 20-team leagues, you want to pay some attention to Chris Felicio at this point. All right, that is all of the games done and dusted. What we're going to look at now is for head-to-head leagues over the last 2 weeks, the players in the top 20, some overvalued and undervalued guys, and the players who are owned in less than 50% of leagues, to try and give you some ideas for waiver wire targets. Let's look at the top 20 guys. We'll count it down. I know you people watching on video, you can see the numbers up there already, but the audio guys, let's have some suspense going. Number 20, Hassan Whiteside. 19, Kyrie. 18, Otto Porter. I believe that will fall. Draymond at 17. Butler at 16. Towns at 15. Gobert 14. Bledsoe at 13. He's probably a little high. Lillard at 12. Gordie Hayward at 11. He has been fantastic this season, Hayward. Paulie George at 10. Johnny Wall at 9. Durant 8. Curry 7. Cousins 6. Kyle Lowry at 5. If you could get a top 10 player back for Kyle Lowry, I would do it immediately. We know that this history of him playing 37 a night means that by the time we get to February or March, he is not good. He is an outside the top 20, outside the top 30 player who gets injured, and this has happened for 2 straight years. So if you can somehow get yourself a top 10 guy back for Lowry, I'd be happy to make that swap despite this really hot form that he's in. Russ is at 4, Harden is at 3, Davis is at 2, and number 1 is Giannis Antetokounmpo. He has been ridiculous. He is averaging almost 2.5 steals and 2.5 blocks over these last 2 weeks. He has taken his block and steal rate. He has almost doubled it from last season. There could definitely be some regression coming in those numbers because it's really unlikely to just to have such huge numbers. And look, no players, I think there's 4 or 5 in history, have averaged two steals and blocks per game. But he's done it coming from 1.2 and 1.4. So we're talking about almost double the rate in those in one season. It is a ludicrous jump. And and the thing is, he can still get better in some of the offensive numbers. He's the clear number one guy over these last 2 weeks. Let's have a look at the over and undervalued players now, based on these rankings. The guys who are potential sell high players, Trevor Booker comes in at number 30. Now, Booker's going to be able to maintain nice numbers. I don't think he's maintaining top 30 numbers, so always explore a deal, depending on what you can get back. Can you get back one of the guys that I'm going to talk about in the undervalued list for Booker? You might be able to at this point, because he's consistently been pretty good, but I can't see him keeping up top 30 numbers. It just feels ridiculous to me. 32 is Wilson Chandler. I touched on him a little bit earlier. I don't think that Chandler can keep up numbers that puts him in this top 35 zone. With the players coming back, with the slight change in what Malone is doing, with Jokic playing better, it's going to be a little bit harder for Chandler to maintain this same level of production. Eric Gordon's at 36. I don't think you're going to be able to sell high there, but I just wanted to point that out, that he is playing really, really well at the moment with Pat Beverly back, but it's unsustainable. Shawnee Kilpatrick at 42. When Lynn comes back, he's going to lose some of his touches, so he's a likelihood to drop. Lou Williams at 43, I've touched on him a million times. I just can't see any way that he can maintain this same level of efficiency, but he very well could. He should be a guy that's a top 70, top 80 guy. He's not a top 50 guy in my opinion. Same for Farton Will Barton, who comes in at number 50. I've been over that a million times. He is going to lose a significant amount of minutes when Gaz Harris gets back to full speed, and I just don't believe in him as a long-term prospect. Moe Harkless at 54, for as much as I love him, 54 is too high. If you can get a top 50 guy back in return, or even a top 70 guy, I'd happily take it. He's a player who more sits in the 80 to 100 range, in my opinion, and Taj Gibson at 61 is a little high for Taj. I really don't think he has that much appeal, though, to sell off, but his current form, current rank is a little bit high. The undervalued guys, the buy low players, Marcus Smart at 206. It does require a specific team, the punt field goal type situation, but Smart can be better than this. Talked about number 188 already, and that's Jonas Valanciunas. A little bit hard to buy low after a 20-10 game, but hopefully you did it prior to that. Pau Gasol at 177 and LaMarcus Aldridge at 168. Both of these Spurs big men can be much better than they've been in the last 2 weeks. Don't go too crazy on them, but they can definitely be both better than what we've seen. Julius Randle at 166. His recent form has reverted to what he did last season. The last 2 games have been okay, but he is a guy that can be better than what he is there. Jabari Parker at 162. He's not remaining outside the top 150, and Reggie Jackson at 144. Just obviously a slow start to the season, but if he's owned by an Ish Smith truther who thinks that maybe they're going to split minutes, you base it on these numbers and go, look, Reggie's not playing too much, and maybe you can pull the wool over someone's eyes. Probably unlikely, but it's worth a try. Devin Booker at 134. He struggles with his shooting still. I'm still not convinced on Booker, but I think he can be better than this. Jordy Clarkson can also have a strong second half. He's at 132. And then a couple of other guys. Drew Holiday, 103. He can be better. Nick Batum, 96. He can be better. Blakey Griffin at 92. That's pretty obvious, that one. He's had some low percentage nights as well, and that's dropped him down the ranks. So have a look at Blake. He is a top 30-ish type of player. Paul Millsap at 68. He's not a top 12 guy. He's not a top 15 guy, but he can get back to being a top 25 guy. So have a look there to see whether that's a possibility. And Kemba's cooled off a little bit as well. He sits at number 64 over the last 2 weeks, just a little bit off in his form. But if you can get him for someone outside the top 50, you absolutely should be looking and doing that. Let's take a look at players who are inside the top 100 in the last 2 weeks who have under 50% ownership. Dion Waiters at 45. I don't think that adding him while he's injured is necessarily the best move, but if he was to come back before some of the other players like Josh Richardson, then he is a clear must-add player. Bebe Nogueira at 59, I touched on him a fair bit earlier. Johnny Henson at 62 is still under 50% ownership. The numbers have started to normalise, but he is a guy to own because you're getting 2 blocks a night. You get the occasional offensive night, but his numbers have started to come back to earth, and there's no reason that Kidd won't bench him again. This is just what Jason Kidd does, so keep an eye on that. Tyson Chandler at 66. Chandler's giving you okay numbers, and it's clear that Earl Watson wants to run with him bigly. He wants to give him a decent amount of minutes most nights. He's limited in what he can do, but he can get rebounds and he can be a field goal percentage guy, and that might be what your team needs. Kylo Quinn is at 81. I really like Kylo Quinn, you know that. I think you should be looking at him and grabbing him if you've got a streaming spot. And let's just see what the Knicks do, because Joakim Noah's been terrible and O'Quinn's been good. Where the Hornacek goes with that, I don't know. I don't believe that he will, but on the chance that it happens, then O'Quinn is going to be good. 82 for Patty Mills. Yep, he's under 50% owned. He should be looked at in 12ers as well. Courtney Lee at 83. I don't really believe in that. You can leave him alone. 86 for Dwight Powell. Yeah, Powell is a fine guy to look at with these injuries to Dirk and to Bogut. He will be inconsistent. He will get inconsistent minutes and inconsistent production, but he can be a guy that has top 100 numbers in this short-term period. Wayne Ellington, he's just shooting a lot of threes. He's fine to add, but there's no real long-term value for Ellington. JaMychal Green at 90, sure. Under 50% owned, own him. Spanish Chocolate at 93, same story. Tyler Johnson at 94, own him. Jameer Nelson at 95, own him. Joshie Richardson's at 98. Now, he hasn't played for a while. I think that Josh Richardson is a guy that you do want to own, but if you're grabbing a guy who's maybe ceiling is top 100 and is not playing, I don't necessarily think that is the best move. And Patrick Patterson comes in at 99. He is okay if he fits your specific goal, but his long-term upside, it's really, really low. So I wouldn't be giving up too much or dropping really too much value or upside to get him, because he's going to be that guy that provides those numbers, but without being able to do much better than that. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be back to look at all 9 games for Friday for a DFS point of view. Let's talk perfect DFS lineups from Thursday. On FanDuel, Kyle Lowry at 43.9 and Shelvin Mack at 31.9. There were a lot of cheap, good point guards, and this was always a good option. Expensive point guard, cheap one. I went with Johnny Wall as my expensive guy, but Lowry was also a pretty good option. Shooting guards, DeMar DeRozan at 42.1 and Zachary LaVine at 39.4. Solid picks there. Small forward, Joe Ingles at 39.5. When the news came out of Gordo Hayward being out, Ingles was a guy I got into some of my lineups, and I was pretty happy that I did. And Kawhi at 41.1. Power forwards, Ersan at 39.6 has been killing it in DFS recently, and Draymond had 44, while Marc Gasol went 47.8 at center, and that total was 369.3. On DraftKings, Lowry 49, Tone Allen 35.4, other way around 34.5. I'm being a bit dyslexic there. Joey Ingles at 43.25, Draymond 48.5, Marc Gasol 51.25, my man Rajon Rondo at 41.5, Ersan Ilyasova 41.5, and the Stifle Tower Rudy Gobert at 45.25 for a total of 354.75 points. Let's have a look at these games now, starting off with the Orlando Magic and the Charlotte Hornets. The Hornets are favored by 6.5, and the total is 200.5. Nick Vucevic is questionable with a right corneal abrasion. Jaylen Brown dunked on him the other day and scratched his eye, so we don't know if Vucevic is going to play. Now, if Vuce is out, it's going to open up more minutes for Bismack Biyombo, but it's also going to allow Serge Ibaka to play at the 5 and move Aaron Gordon to the 4. So that could mean that Gordon becomes an interesting guy, because they're not going to run Arinze Onwaku or Steven Zimmerman out there for backup center minutes. It's going to be Serge. So we're going to have a little bit less Serge at the 4, meaning more Gordon at the 4, which could work in his favor. So I'll talk about him in a second. Let's look at the point guards. DJ Augustine is at 3,800. He's been okay. but he hasn't been spectacular. But the matchup is really pleasing. It is a situation where he's not a revenge game, because it's been a long time since he played for Charlotte, but back into familiar surrounds for the team that drafted him. At 3,800, I absolutely think that you can look at him in tournaments, but in cash games, it's really tough. He could easily go for 27, hit a couple of threes and get hot, but his downside's 15 points, which at 3,800 is not even that bad. Lord Alfred Payton at 5,400. Yeah, look, he had that awesome game against Washington, but how much can we rely upon that? He had 21 in the last game in 28 minutes. Again, the matchup for him is positive too, but he just doesn't quite have it at that salary. If you were, say, at 4,500 instead of 54, then I'd be all about it. Kemba at 8,400 has been a little bit underpriced lately, but I think that I know that this is a good matchup for him against the Magic. Point guards do pretty well, and I think he should be looking at a 40-pointer here. So I think if you're spending up at point guard and you don't want to go with Russell Westbrook, Kemba Walker could be one of those guys. Shooting guard Evan Fournier at 53. He's been a little bit depressed in his recent value, not too badly, but he did have a 27-pointer in the last one. The matchups are positive. He's a bit of a pivot away from some of the other shooting guards, but he could go off in this one. Whereas Nick Batum at 7,100. Look, it's sort of right on what he's been doing recently, averaging 41 over the last 3, 36 over the last 5. He's an okay guy to look at, but I don't think I'll be using him in many lineups. At small forward, Aaron Gordon at 4,000. I think it's a great spot to use him in a tournament if Vucevic is out. If Vuce plays, I don't really see using Aaron Gordon. I can see him getting 20 points, but there's a lot of risk involved in it. But his upside, if Vooch is out, becomes enormous. It becomes 30, becomes 35 points potentially if he gets some extra run at the 4. So it's a situation, unless Frank Vogel just says, nah, let's just play Damian Rudes for those extra minutes at the 4, which is something that Vogel could absolutely do, and he's done before. So bear in mind there is some risk there. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist at 5,000. He's just not getting anywhere near those numbers recently. Had just 9 in the last game. Not interested in him despite the $300 salary drop that occurred on FanDuel. Jeffy Green at 3,700. He had 9 in the last game, so that's where we're at with Jeff Green. He occasionally puts in a big game, but not enough for me to care. While Marco Bellinelli had a big 25er in the last game. Again, he's just too inconsistent to care about. Marvin Williams at 4,400. He's a little bit lower on some of the other sites, and that makes him more appealing. At 4,400 on FanDuel, we know he's going to be starting, but we know his production this season has been really poor. I don't hate him. I reckon there's other guys that you want to go for, though. Frank Kaminsky's out of action, and Serge out of action, I mean, we're not using him. And Serge Ibaka at 6,200. The matchup I don't like. Serge is very up and down with what he does. I can't see myself using him. At centre, Cody Zeller's at 4,500. Been a little bit poor in his recent games, but I'd be okay with throwing him into a tournament. There are actually really a lot of cheap centres on this slate, so that probably, if you're going cheap, Zeller's not going to be your number one option. Bismack Biyombo at 44. I would not use him unless we hear that Vooch is out, and if Vooch is out, then we look at Bismack at 44. His ceiling is really not that high, but like Augustine, he's playing against his former team here. He has done well against them in the past as a member of the Raptors, so he is a name to watch out for, but I'd be much more interested in him if Vucevic happens to be out. As for Vooch, if he plays at 7,000, I don't want to spend 7,000 on Nick Vucevic, regardless of if you can see or not. The next game we take a look at, we're going to look at the Toronto Raptors. They take on the Boston Celtics. No spread release for this one yet. Isaiah Thomas has been ruled out already. DeMario Carroll is the other one we need to pay attention to. It's unlikely that he plays. I don't believe he's officially been ruled out because it's a back-to-back, but he will unlikely be in the lineup, so that means we're going to get a lot more Norm Powell. Let's look at the point guards here. We've got, obviously, Kyle Lowry at 8,600, who had another 44 today. Yeah, 8,600, he's fine. The Celtics have been pretty good at allowing points for point guards, so Lowry does have some value. There are a lot of other options around there, but you can easily pivot onto Lowry. For the Celtics, we're looking at Smart, we're looking at Terry Rozier. Now, Smart just played the 23 minutes due to foul trouble in the last game. At 5,100, I'm fairly confident that Smart can get back to 25 points here, so I think he is a decent guy. The matchup's not ideal, but the price versus opportunity for Smart weighs it in his favour. You could also consider Terry Rozier, but I don't like the fact that he's at 4,200. Yeah, he had 27 in the last game in 26 minutes, but I think that extra run and that extra production came not just because Isaiah Thomas was out, but because Smart was sitting on the bench and playing just 23 minutes. You could look at Rozier in a tournament. I'm just not that keen. Whereas Corey Joseph, he's at 4,000. I don't really feel it with Corey. Sorry, mate. Let's look at the shooting guards. Minimum salary for Norm Powell. Absolutely. Let's get stuck into it. He can comfortably get 20 points in a start. He should get 28 to 30 minutes, which is what he's done most nights when Carroll has been out. So the matchup's really positive for him as well. The Celtics are allowing wing players to put up some pretty good numbers. DeMar DeRozan at 8,700, he gets that same benefit of playing against the Celtics wings who allow those numbers to be put up. So 8,700 for DeMar is okay. I don't know necessarily how high his ceiling is. Can you expect a 50 out of him? Probably not, but I think you should be feeling fairly comfortable of getting 40 plus from DeRozan. Avery Bradley at 6,900. He had 35 in the last game. Without Isaiah, I'm okay with spending that money on him. I don't like the fact that it's risen by 300. His salary seems to go up really quickly after a good performance. If Thomas was playing, I wouldn't want to be looking at him at that salary. Let's look at the small forwards now. Jay Crowder is at 5,600. Fine. I absolutely love that at that price, especially with Carroll not likely to be there. Terrence Ross gets a boost. He's at 3,700, becomes a really good tournament pick. He can go for 26 or 27, and at 3,700, that's returning a fair bit of value at that spot. The power forwards, there's not much to love here. Pat's at 44. I'm going to say no. Amir Johnson, Jonas Jerebko, Pascal Siakam. Let's just say no for all of them together. Jonas Valanciunas at 5,100. Positive matchup against the Celtics. He dropped 35 today in his 29 minutes. 5,100. All aboard, JV. I don't know how high his ownership will be. I don't think it'll be high, but I was aboard him yesterday, or today, Thursday, and I'm aboard him again. Al Horford at 7,900. It's too expensive, man. That's almost 40. That's almost 40 points worth of value you need back to get it back from Horford to spend that much, and I'm just not willing to do it. So no, it's a no from me. Kelly Olynyk at 3,500. I don't think we can do that at this point until we feel more consistent in his minutes. And given Brad Stevens' past, that probably will never come. Miami and Cleveland is the next game that's up. J.R. Smith is questionable with his knee injury that caused him to miss the last game against the Knicks, and Scooter Magruder's ankle for Miami is a questionable situation as well. If Magruder is out, they're going to be seeing huge minutes for these Heat guys. You're going to be seeing 40 plus probably for Dragic, for Tyler Johnson, for anyone who can actually move. Wayne Ellington should get 40 plus. We might see Derek Williams getting up to 30. This could be an absolute smashing as well, which is another thing to pay attention to. Let's look at the point guards. Tyler Johnson at 5,500. Love that, and I love it even more if Magruder is out. He put up 41 in the last game. Tyler, he's averaging 30 over the last 5. It's a good matchup against Kyrie. I love him at that price. Really good spot for him. Dragic at 7,300. I think it's hard to go past Dragic as well. Again, especially if Magruder's out, he's going to get some extra minutes, and he is going to be worth looking at against Kyrie. Love it at that salary. As for Irving at 7,300, I will take Dragic at 7,300. I don't think that Irving is a worthwhile guy to take a look at. He puts up okay numbers. Like he had 37 in the last game. He's averaging 36 over the last 3. They're okay numbers at 7,300. They're just not. I just don't feel that confident against a Heat team that somehow still restricts what they can do or what opposition point guards can do. Shooting guards, J.R. Smith, no, even though at minimum salary, no thanks. Scooter Magruder, if he plays at 4,000, he is a tournament option. He dropped almost 30 in the last game just by the fact that he's there and there's no one else around. So you'd look at him in that situation. Wayne Ellington at 48. You know what? Ellington at 48 is not ideal because he doesn't do anything apart from score. He's going to get some minutes and he might be worth looking at, but that salary just feels way too high. Iman Shumpert at 36. If J.R. Smith plays, there's no interest there. Same with DeAndre Liggins. No real interest in Shumpert, even if Smith doesn't play. But he did have 24 in the last game with Smith out, so that would be value at 3,600. LeBron at 9,800. I put this in because he is playing against the Heat. And yes, there's one player left from the time when he was there, and that's Udonis Haslem. But the Pat Riley Eric Spoelstra factor, LeBron has grudges. LeBron has pettiness. We know he does all this. So at 9,800, and he's cheaper on some of the other sites, I feel pretty confident of getting 45 out of LeBron. He had 46 against the Knicks in 32 minutes. He could just as easily do the same thing here against Miami. And if it wasn't Miami and it was another team that was as banged up, I'd feel less interested in LeBron. But because of the Pat Riley stuff, because of Eric Spoelstra, his former team, I can really see LeBron putting up a pretty decent performance here, and enough to justify using him alongside some other lower price players. Dick Jefferson, Mike Dunleavy, no interest for them. Power forward. Joshua McRoberts is at minimum salary. Didn't work out in the last game, put up 7 points, but he did get 30 minutes. And in the game prior to that, he had 23 points. So he can do it at 3,500. It's not an ideal matchup, but he just might be forced into extra run because no one else is around. So we do have to look at McBob and consider him. Channing Frye's at 3,600. No, too up and down with not a very high ceiling. Kevin Love at 7,800. Kevin Love's fine. If he was at 7,000, I'd say that's okay. At 7,800, I'm not all that interested in him. The matchup's not terrible. He is quite up and down though. So if you do use him, don't feel confident in a cash game. Derek Williams at 3,700. Look, he's getting some minutes. He does nothing with them, but this might be a time to punt him at 3,700. Consider him in a tournament and go, hey Derek, just if I get 24, I'll be pretty happy. Especially if Scooter Magruder's out. At center, Tristan Thompson had 34 in the last game and scored 4 points. At 5,100, I feel okay that Tristan Thompson can get 25 points. Hassan Whiteside at 8,800. Look, he's definitely been a little bit down. Had a poor performance in his last outing. The Cavs have had issues with stretching out opposition centers, so he could be a little bit of a fade in certain situations, Whiteside. Not all of them, but he is not a must-own play for me on FanDuel anyway. Let's look at the next game. We're going to take a look at the Atlanta Hawks and the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks are favored by 3.5. That's how far Atlanta's fallen, and the total is 280. Paul Millsap is listed as probable with his hip injury, and Timmy Hardaway is probable with his knee. We've got no Kent Bazemore in this one, and for Milwaukee, Michael Beasley is questionable with a left mid-foot sprain. That might mean we actually get Mirza Teletovic back into the rotation, who did not play a single minute in the Bucks' last game. Let's look at the point guards. Dally's at 4,200. A beautiful matchup for point guards going up against the Hawks. So I think that Dally is absolutely okay to use at 4,200. He had 21 in the last game. He can go for 25. His downside, it's not that low. His floor's not that low. I think he's worth having a look at. Brogdon at 3,600. He put up 24 in the last game. That is a real tournament punt option for Brogo. Maybe he goes out there and splits the minutes with Dally again. You can't have confidence in it, but you can definitely look at it and say, oh, you know what, maybe it'll happen. Dennis Schroeder, the salary has risen too much now. 6,800 in a really negative matchup. That's a pass from me, and we're not using Jason Terry or Malcolm Delaney. Just 3,700 for Timmy Hardaway as a shooting guard. He would likely start. He had 10 points in 22 minutes in the last game. He is very hit or miss. So he's tough in cash, but he is worth looking at in a tournament because he can get hot and he can drop 30, and then at 3,700 you're loving it. But he is up and down. Giannis is at 10,300. He had 55 in the last game. I had a couple of suggestions for the triple-double 5x5. One of them was a triple-double nickel, and the other one was a dream in honor of Hakeem. I think we're just going to call it a dream. Let's look. If it even happens, again, it's happened 2 times ever in the history of the NBA, so the chances of it happening aren't that high, and it probably doesn't need a specific name, but let's call it the dream. if Giannis happens to get one, a triple-double 5x5. At 10,300, he is a fine play in DFS in any sort of scenario. Kyle Korver at 3,700 has played a little bit better in his 2 games coming off the bench. It's still not resulting in huge DFS scores. He had 19 in the last game in 34 minutes. He does have the ability to shoot and to score, and he could get hot, but I'm not really feeling it from Kyle. Small forwards, Tarbo's at 4,200. Much more interested in Tarbo at that salary. That's good for me. He had 26 in the last game. I think he's a pretty much a lock for over 20 in this new role. So I'm okay using Tarbo here. Mick Beasley, no. Tone Snell, of course not. And Mirza Teletovic and Torian Prince, no. Although Prince, no. Don't get sucked into that, Josh. Power forwards, Jabari Parker at 6,400. Has been not ideal, but still putting up good numbers. Like, I wouldn't say he's been playing well, and you can have a look at his last 2 weeks' numbers, as I talked about before, how low he was. But his last 3 games, he's averaging 34 points. And without playing well, to be getting a point a minute is still okay. And at 6,400, I'm okay with him in this spot. Mike Muscala at 36, nah. Paul Millsap at 8,000. The salary's up back to 8,000, which makes it a little bit worrisome. But Millsap's played well since coming back from the hip injury. He's done well against Milwaukee in the past. I think it's a solid play to get 37 plus out of Millsap at this spot. But remember, he hasn't been great this year. Just the last 2 couple of games have been okay. At centre, Johnny Henson at 4,700. Don't really love him too much on FanDuel at that price. Yeah, he can go over that, and he can do that comfortably, but it's against Dwight Howard. I'm not all that comfortable with spending almost 5,000 on John Henson. As for Howard, Henson's terrible. So Howard recovered pretty well in the last game, had 54 points. At 7,800, he is okay to look at. It is a very positive matchup for Dwight, and hopefully he can keep that momentum going. So I think he's worth a look. Greggy Munro at 5,000. At 4,000, sure. At 5,000, there's just no way to trust it. And again, the Dwight Howard matchup, I don't think it's going to really work in Munro's favour. Let's look now to the next game, which is the Detroit Pistons and the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Pistons are favoured by 2.5. The total here is 204 points. The Timberwolves, one of only 2 teams that are coming off a back-to-back. The other is the Toronto Raptors. At point guard, Rick Rubio at 5,500. Still too expensive on FanDuel. The matchup is okay, but he's just not getting anywhere near that sort of production, so not a chance. Reggie Jackson is at 5,800. He's had a $1,200 salary drop. I think that it's okay to look at in a tournament. Yeah, he hasn't lit the world on fire since his return. I'd want to hear what Van Gundy has to say about his minutes prior to this game. But if Van Gundy says, you know what, he's going to be getting 28 minutes, then at 5,800 I would say, okay, I can imagine a world where Reggie Jackson gets 30 points in 28 minutes. And not sure his ownership will be that high, but it's going to require us to sort of pay attention to what Van Gundy says pre-game. Ish Smith is out of consideration. Let's look at shooting guard. Zachary Levine's at 6,000, so the salary hasn't risen. Had a nice 39-pointer today. The KCP defense is a bit of a concern for Levine. The back-to-back is a marginal concern as well, but I think he is a decent play, and he should be in play for tournaments and for cash. As for KCP, his numbers have dropped. He's at 5,700. He's sort of reintegrating himself with Reggie Jackson, so I'm not interested until they get their chemistry going. Small forwards, Wigo is at 6,000. Horrible matchup here. He had a nice 32-pointer today after a couple of decent performances, but he's done pretty well against Detroit previously. It's just that the small forwards against the Pistons this year have really struggled. He is okay to look at. I don't say that with much confidence. Speaking of no confidence, Marcus Morris, don't have confidence in him, even though he's priced at just 5,000. For the power forwards, Gorgie Dieng at 5,500. Just a little bit under where he needs to be as well. Like, he's just not quite at the right spot. So he's a fade for me. While Toby Harris at 6,200, the salary has jumped by $600, and that's taking me away from using Toby Harris until that salary comes under 6,000. Johnny Lewis at 46, and he is overpriced in my opinion as well. Centers. Let's look at Drummond. He is at 8,200. He had a nice 55-point game in the last outing. He's averaging 41 over the last 5. He is up and down. He is a very, very tough guy to have a look at in most cash game situations. He's been solid, though, against Minnesota in the past. Towns still has a lot of defensive issues. So Drummond is a clear tournament option without much cash game reliability. As for Towns at 9,200, I don't really love that price, and I don't really like it at all on FanDuel at that price. He's all right. Oh, he's better than all right, but only a 31 today. 39 over the last 3. It's not befitting of a 9,000 plus salary. So on FanDuel, I don't love Carl Towns. As for Cole Aldrich, I love him, but it's just not going to happen, I don't think, for DFS today. Let's look now at Houston and Oklahoma City. The Rockets are favored by 1. The total is a massive 225 points. That's great. That really suits us from a DFS point of view. We've got Harden versus Westbrook. Let's start by looking at Russ. He's at 12,700. He's averaging 64 points over the last 3. He's averaging 63 points over the last 5. And that salary is huge. The matchup is not ideal. Patrick Beverley is not only a really good defensive point guard, he's Russell Westbrook's nemesis. So I think it's been real hard to fade Russ, but this is the time to do it. Beverley is just a mosquito sitting on your balls, just biting you. And that's how he is to Russ. And Russ gets pissed and he gets distracted, and it does affect what he can do. Now, Russ will still probably get 50, but at almost $13,000, 50 doesn't cut it. He needs to be getting you at least 60. And I don't think this is a great look. The total is great. The pace will be good. But the Beverley factor, and Russ is pretty much matchup proof, except against Beverley, in my opinion. That's a real concern to me. So I think it's a fade time. As for Beverley, well, he just dropped a casual 37 in the last game, but he's priced at 4,900. I don't like Pat Beverley at 4,900, although the defense that Westbrook provides, maybe he can do something. But I feel like last game against the Lakers was a little bit fluky from Pat. Jim Harden at 11,500, absolutely fine. He hasn't been giving us quite the numbers we wanted, but the defensive matchup here is definitely in his favor. I think you should be looking at 55 plus here from Harden. So if I'm spending up this 11,000 plus, it's going Harden's direction instead of Westbrook's. As for Vic Oladipo, he'll be matching up against Jim, so he gets a little bit of an easy go defensively. His numbers have been slightly suppressed, but I don't hate using him in a tournament just because of the high pace and because of the Harden matchup. He is averaging under 30 over the last 5, so that clearly doesn't appeal to you, but there's no reason why he wouldn't go out there and put up 34 against Harden in a game that's high pace and trying to keep up. So and especially if Russ doesn't quite have it going against Beverley, maybe we see a little bit extra from Vic. So he's not a cash guy, but he's an option. Anthony Morrow is at 3,600 because he's been getting some extra minutes lately. So he's had a little bit of a rise of $100. Dropped 19 in the last game. It's still not enough to make me interested, whereas Eric Gordon's at 5,400 and putting up really good standard league numbers, but it's not spectacular DFS. 32 in the last game in 24 minutes was great. Lakers, though. And 28 over the last 5 is really good at 5,400. I just find him just a tad risky. I'm not buying it fully. Small forward Andre Robertson's at 39. In a tournament, you can fit Russ and Jim in, and maybe you have to go with a guy like Robertson who can get you 18, 19, 20 points. I would rather spend the 42 and get Tabo in there with more of an upside of 25 or 26. But Robertson has been getting a ton of minutes. It doesn't always convert to points for him, though. Trevor Ariza at 5,500. Not his best performance, but his minutes were limited in the last game, so that's give him a pass there. I think that at 5,500, you can be fairly confident of getting 25 out of Ariza, but that's not quite enough. Sammy Decker, the numbers look good, but some blowout factors there. 3,900 for Decker for a guy that's averaging 21.5 over the last 5. That's appealing. I just don't think he gets those 25 minutes that he has played across those last 5 games. Power forwards. Ryan Anderson's at 4,500. Nah. Look, in a tournament, he can always go off. It just happens so infrequently that I don't think it's really worth the risk. Enes Kanter at 5,100. Don't love this matchup for Kanter. I think this is a low minutes Enes Kanter game. At 5,100, I will not be spending that up on him. Domantas Sabonis, Montrezl Harrell, they're the other power forwards, and they don't really need to be discussed. Let's look at the centre. Steve Adams is at 4,800. It's not an expensive salary for him, but it is a decent matchup. So I think that Adams, again, one of these cheaper centres that you can take a look at, and he can come out there and he could put up 26 or 27. Definitely in play there for Steve, who's been a little bit disappointing with his fantasy production this season. Clint Capella's at 5,900. His minutes have been reduced, but it hasn't really affected his production. Still averaging 28 over the last 3 in just 23 minutes a night. Hopefully he gets some extra run here and is able to push to 30 points, but 5,900 is not all that appealing of a salary for big Clint Capella. Nene, nah. Joffrey Lavergne, I'll say no. But Lavergne, you know what? If Cantor gets limited, then Lavergne could come in, play an extra 5-6 minutes, and maybe give you value at basically minimum salary. So not a complete write-off, Josh. Don't just write him off that quickly. Next up, we've got Indiana. They take on the Dallas Mavericks. The Pacers are favored by 5. The total here is 201. Seth Curry is questionable. I think I'd lean more towards doubtful for Seth at this point, but we'll see. It's not really going to impact too much, though, for DFS purposes. Darren Williams is at 6,000. He's been really putting up really good numbers. I'm not sure I want to spend 6,000 on Darren Williams at this point. Despite his good standard league numbers, they're not necessarily translating 100% to DFS. So I think at 6,000 he is a fade. Jeffy Teague is at 7,100.
My name is Jeff.
He had 43 in the last game, which was very impressive. It was against Phoenix, though, and Dallas is a nightmare for point guards. Strong fade for me for Teague. Devin Harris is the other point guard. Aaron Brooks, we're not caring about those guys. Shooting guard, Monte Ellis, I would highly suggest not doing that. Yes, it is one of his former teams. Yes, he's done well against Dallas, but this season he is doing the opposite of well. He's averaging 14 over the last 5 in 29 minutes. He's barely playing at times. Rod Stuckey is playing over him. It is the ultimate contrarian. Let's put Monte Ellis in. I will not be doing that. Wesley Matthews at 5,100. If Matthews gets hot, Monte can't stop him. So I can totally see using Wes Matthews and seeing him get even a minimum of 22 points. And at 5,100, that's not a bad floor to look at for Wesy Wes. Let's look at small forward. Paulie George is at 8,400. Not bad for Paul George. I think that he's in play on certain sites. I don't 100% love him on FanDuel. Just feels a tad overpriced there, but not bad to consider. Definitely should be in your player pool consideration. The Pencil's at 6,100. He had a real poor performance in the last game, just 11 points. I think he can do okay here though against a Pacers team, and he's going to be playing mainly at the 4. And 4s do tend to put up some pretty good numbers against. Forwards do put up good numbers against the Pacers. So the Pencil is a guy to look at. I'd probably lean a little bit more GPP with Harrison Barnes, but I can consider him in cash as well. Justin Anderson, CJ Miles, Dorian Finney-Smith, Glenn Robinson III, they're just not going to do enough. At power forward, Dwighty Powell's at 4,000. Yep, love it. He had 26 in the last game. He's averaging 26 in the last 3. No Dirk, no Bogut. He can be a little bit frustrating. But I think that he can get $4,000 worth of value. I don't have too much of a concern there. 4,800 for Thad Young. He's not even returning that sort of value with what he's done previously. He's had really good form against Dallas in the past, but just with the way that things are going, with the way that he's touching the ball, it's just not happening for me. Centers. Salah Mejri. Only 11 minutes in the last game, foul trouble, and Boogie Cousins. It's a different story taking on Miles Turner. He's at minimum salary. In the previous games that Bogut has missed, he is getting 27 to 28 minutes. So I think that he can quite comfortably go out there and exceed 3,500. But there is the risk of this 11-minute bullshit that happened in the last game. I don't think it will happen, but I think this is a really good opportunity for Mejri against Miles Turner to go out there and put up potentially 25 points. I think he's got that ability to do that. As for Turner at 5,900, not interested really. He had a big game against Dallas to start the season. Hasn't really been able to replicate that a lot of times. He's not a bad center option, but there are so many other good center options out there that he is probably a fade to me. Not that many people will be on him, so maybe you look at him in a tournament as a pivot type of player. The New York Knicks and the Sacramento Kings. No spread released for this one just yet. Derek Rose is questionable with his sore lower back that forced him to miss the last game against the Cavs. Obviously, if Rose is out, then it's all aboard Brandon Jennings, but he has risen to 4,800, so he's not as clear-cut as he was before. And in fact, if he was 4,800 in the last game where he had 22 points, he didn't meet value. So he's a guy to look at, but he's not an automatic let's plug and play Brando if Derek happens to be out. Now, if Derek plays at 6,600, I won't be using him at that salary anyway. On the Kings side of things, Garrett Temple's at 3,600. He had 24 points in the last game, and that's great, but I place zero faith in Garrett Temple doing that again. And the 5,600 for Darren Collison, it's coming down. It's just not down enough, and this is not a positive matchup for point guards, and his minutes are a bit too variable for me. I'm not interested in Collison just yet. Ty Lawson, same thing. Shooting guards, Courtney Lee had a big 28-pointer in the last game. He's at 4,100. I don't trust him at all. Ben McLemore, the new starter, minimum salary. You know what? I don't hate using McLemore in a tournament. It feels dumb to say it because he's been so poor, but he can get hot and he can put up numbers that aren't just scoring. It feels weird to consider him, but I would definitely look at him if I had multiple tournament lineups and think, you know what, his ownership is going to be like 0.4%. It might work out. Aaron Aflalo, no. Small forwards, Melo, 7,300. He's been a little bit poor in his last 4 games. Really terrible against Cleveland. I think this is a bounce back for Melo. I like it. I think there's definite value in using him here. And his opposite number, Rudy Gay, 7,200. Fine with using both of those guys. I think you could use either one of them fairly interchangeably. If I had to go one, I'd probably take Melo for GPP and Gay for cash. That just sounds bad. Gay for cash. Anyway, Matt Barnes, 3,900. Who knows what Matt Barnes we're going to get? We're going to get the one that gets 8 points in 23 minutes, or we're going to get the one that gets 43 points in 23 minutes. He is all over the place. His role is a little bit all over the place as well. Low 20s, high 20s. At 3,900, you can consider it in a tournament because he'll be low owned and he's got the ability to go absolutely massive. And it's a good matchup. But your confidence in it shouldn't be high. Lance Thomas, the other small forward on the board, he's not really worth us paying attention to. Power forwards, we look at, of course.
Percentages.
He is at 7,400. He's been a little bit disappointing with his numbers of late. I like the matchup, though. This is a good spot for him to get back on track. So I think you can look at him, except the play against Boogie Cousins. He had some real struggles against Boogie in the last game, and that will probably end up making me fade him. It's not a complete fade, but I'm not all that interested. Omri Caspi at 36. You know what? Caspi's been getting some extra minutes and some production. I just don't think the upside is just quite there with him at the moment. And Willie Cauley-Stein's also playing, but doing not much with those minutes. At centre, it is Kyler Quinn, 4,200. He's averaging over 25 in the last 5 games. Definitely some interesting things in there with some games with Noah, some games without Noah. He has outplayed Noah in the games they've played together. 4,200. Again, just one of these cheap centers that you could look at. I would have absolutely no ability to trust him in a cash game because we don't know what Hornacek will do. Yeah, he played the last 9 minutes or last 10 minutes of the game against the Cavs in blowout time, and that got him to 21 minutes. How much would he have played otherwise? Well, we don't really know. Even though he's been playing over Noah, he might have played the last 10 minutes of that game, but he played junk time. He played that, you know, with the lineup of Kuzminskas and Gomez, just all the reserves down the stretch. He's absolutely worth a look in a tournament. He could easily go for 30 plus, and at 4,200, that would be great. But there's a risk. On the other side, DeMarcus Cousins, 11,200. This is where you're spending your money. It's on Harden, it's on Cousins, in preference to Westbrook, in my opinion, just with the matchups. But I love this for Cousins in this one now. I don't know if these legal proceedings are going to bother him. It didn't against Dallas, clearly, where he dropped 55. I think he should be able to get 50 out of Boogie. Well, me saying that's obvious because his lowest score in the last 5 is 51.3. You're getting 50 out of him basically every single night. So take it and enjoy it. As for Noah, he's at 4,200. I don't know why you would spend 4,200 on Joakim Noah at this point in the season. All right, we are almost done with the games. We've got one left, and it is the Phoenix Suns and the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers are favored by 2. The total is 217.5 points. Let's look at point guards. Jordy Clarkson is now a point guard on FanDuel. He's been poor, but he's at 5,000, so it's a low salary. Yeah, he's averaging just 18 in the last 5, but I do like him in a tournament, and assuming he starts again in a matchup against Phoenix, which is a great matchup for a point guard, Clarkson can easily get 30 plus, like no problem at all. But it's hard to rely upon him at this point. Marcelo Huertas had 28 minutes in the last game, played a lot of junk time. At 3,700, if he even gets to 20 minutes, that could be useful. If he could get 20 points in 20 minutes, I think he does have the ability to do it again in a real plus matchup. You have to look at it, but without huge confidence, especially if it was 3,500, just saving that extra $200, I'd be a little happier with it. Eric Bledsoe at 8,000, definitely been a little bit down the last couple with some reason though. Limited minutes, just 28 minutes in some blowout situations. Good matchup for Bledsoe. Don't think many people will be on him. You'll be a lot of Lowrys, a lot of Walkers, a lot of Hardens if he's point guard eligible, Giannis, that sort of spot, Westbrook. And Bledsoe might slide under the radar and could very easily get you 50. Very. So just a name to think about. Shooting guards, Lou Williams is at 6,000. I think a lot of people are going to be on Lou. So make him not a great tournament pick, and the salary at 6,000 is not ideal. And look, he had a good game in the last one, put up just 27. He is putting up huge numbers, though. It is hard to completely fade him, so I think he's a good cash play. Brandon Knight's not a good anything play, although the projections do like him, and his salary is really nice at 4,400. I just would find it really difficult to use Brandon Knight given how he's been used. And same with Devin Booker at 5,900. I can't justify spending that on Devin Booker. He has done very well against Los Angeles though, so bear that in mind, and you might consider looking at him in a tournament with the hope that he gives you a 40-pointer, because he could do that. His form has not quite been there the last couple. At small forward, Lou Deng 3,600. No thanks. Brandon Ingram back in a bench role. His minutes are still the same. He's at 4,200. He's not a high upside guy. I think he's probably a fade there. And PJ Tucker, no, thank you. Power forwards, Jared Dudley, 37. I'm not interested there. Larry Nance at 42. Yeah, not too against Larry Nance at 42. I don't think his ownership will be really low, and it's a pretty decent matchup, so I can understand using Nance. I probably won't do it personally. Julius Randle at 64. Another $300 price rise for Randall. That's making me completely turn off him, so he is a no-go for me. And Alex Len, love Alex Len, just not getting enough minutes for me to care. At center, well, there's not much here. Tyson Chandler's at 4,900. You could say use him in a tournament, but even then his upside's not high enough for me to consider. And Tim Mozgov, it's just not happening for him. Unfortunately for Lakers fans who have to watch a team that shelled out $72 million to Tim Mozgov and it not be the worst contract on the team. Let's look at the picks of the day now. FanDuel, Jordy Clarkson 5,000, Tyler Johnson 55, and Kemba at 8,400. Shooting guard, Norm Powell 35, Lou Williams 6,000, as I mentioned, more of a cash game guy, and Jim Harden 11,500. Small forwards, Tabo Cephalosha 42, the Pencil 61, and LeBron at 9,800. Power forwards, Dwighty Power 4,000, Jabari's at 6,400, and Paulie Millsap at 8,000, and the centre Salah Mejri at 3,500, Jonas Valanciunas at 51, and DeMarcus Cousins 11,200. On DraftKings, Marcelo Huertas at 3,200, much happier with that salary on DraftKings. Kemba at 7,200, Yanni at 10,000. Shooting guards, Daly is at 4,000, Clarko is at 5,400, and Jim Harden 11,500. The small forwards, Tarbo's at 44, Mallow is at 73, and LeBronald is at 9,600. Power forwards, Marv Williams is at 4,200, Harrison Barnes 6,100, and Paulie George 8,000. And the centers, Valanciunas 4,900, Steve Adams 5,000, Boogie Cousins 10,900. That 4,900 on Jonas Valanciunas is ludicrously cheap. Let's look for the Australians here. Moneyball, Pat Bev 37. Shout out to Dean Vasic, who won the Locked On tournament that I set up on Moneyball the last 2 days. So Dean, you are absolutely flying. Pat Bev at 3,700, Tyler Johnson 5,000, and Russ Westbrook 12,700. He's worth a look on Moneyball. I still think he's a fade in most cases. Wayne Ellington 35, Lou Williams 59, and Jim Harden 11,100. Jay Crowder 44, Rudy Gay 66, and LeBronald at 8,800. Really cheap for James. Dwighty Powell 37, Randall at 53, much happier with him at that salary. And the centers, Valanciunas 46, ridiculous. Howard at 6,400 and DeMarcus at 10,800. On Draft Stars, Marcelo Huertas is minimum salary 5,000. Tyler Johnson 9,450 and Kemba 15,350. Shooting guards, Wayne Ellington, 5'6", Lou Williams, 12'1", and Jim Harden, 23,600. Tarbos at 7,050. Jay Crowder, 10'3", LeBron, 18,650. Power forwards, Dwighty Powell, 72, the Pencil, 11,000, and Kevin Love, 14,700. And centre, Salah Mejri, 5,000, Dwight at 13,300, and Hassan Whiteside, 14,800. We're done for today's podcast. Another long one, guys. Make sure you are leaving a review if you get a chance on iTunes. It's always greatly appreciated. So thank you to everyone who's done that. And thank you in advance to the people who are just about to go and do it right this instant. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. Basketball Monster Twitter is at BaskMonster for all of the news as it happens. We are done. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Langston Galloway.